Of all the places on planet Earth, there is none that inspires more awe than the Himalayas. For hundreds of generations, its inhabitants have worshipped these mountains, believing powerful deities reside there. But there is one mountain they respect more than any other. They call it Chomolungma, the mother goddess of the world. Everywhere else, it is known as Everest. The search for adventure lives at the core of every man. This is the story of 6 Americans who traveled halfway around the globe in search of a great adventure. What they experienced would forever change the way they looked at the world and their place in it. The journey would begin in Nepal's capital city of Kathmandu. From there, they would board a small propeller-driven aircraft and fly into the Himalayas, landing on a tiny runway carved into the side of a mountain in the village of Lukla. There, the team begins the 8-day expedition to their ultimate goal, Everest Base Camp. At 17,400 feet, Everest Base Camp is the final stop for mountaineers hoping to summit Everest. It is a desert of ice and rock, sitting on a constantly evolving glacier. The air is thin. Oxygen levels are 50% of that of sea level. Due to the thin air, helicopters have crashed trying to fly here, and many lives have been taken in the attempt. Base camp is only accessible by foot. The team would be led by leadership coach Ed Smith. In 2005, he had been part of another expedition to base camp. From that team of 7, only 2 made it. Ed was one of them.
Going to Nepal, trekking to Everest Base Camp is risky. I had a close family member said to me, isn't this going to be a very risky thing for you to do? And I said, yes, of course it is. But to live life without risk is to risk not living.
Mike Yarborough is married with 2 grown children. He's a business owner and an accomplished triathlete.
I've gotten to where I like to travel and see other places, and I enjoy that time so much because it feel like you come alive.
Newlyweds Mark and Ann Bortz wanted to travel to Everest Base Camp together.
I have been attracted to Mount Everest since a young age. Never in my life did I think I'd have an opportunity to actually go there and see Mount Everest or hike through the Himalayas.
Doug Perry is married with a 4-year-old daughter and another baby on the way. He too is a triathlete and has even earned the title of Ironman.
I grew up in East Tennessee and did a lot of hiking and backpacking in the Smokies, and have always just thought if I ever had the chance, I'd jump at going to the Himalayan mountains.
Wayne Cole is an outdoorsman and athlete.
Everest Base Camp really tests your mettle. It tests your mind, your spirit, and you know, I wanted to test myself.
They come from Nashville, Tennessee, a city surrounded by green forests, scenic farmland, and picturesque small towns. What they would experience in Nepal would be a very different environment than what they were used to. Kathmandu, an ancient city of 2.5 million people. There they met Bishwa and Ramila Karmacharya. Bishwa operates the expedition company that will be leading the team in the mountains. He and his wife are Christians and also lead a ministry known as Transformation Nepal that serves the poor throughout Kathmandu.
Going to Kathmandu is an experience all in its own.
You have the Buddhists there. You have some shamans who are there. You have Hindus that are there. And it's just an eclectic place.
Cars are going both ways. There's no traffic lights. Horns are constantly blasting.
lot of cattle that crossed the streets or were even sleeping, lying down in the roads.
And our national animal also is a cow. And the reason why they chose the cow as a national animal is they consider cow as a goddess. In the Nepal, everything they consider god and goddess, like a tree, like a stone, like a river, like a sun, like a moon. And accidentally, if you kill a cow, they consider as you kill a man. They keep you in a jail whole in your life.
But instead of caging the
Stated
cows
rule.
so that they're protected, they just allow them to roam freely and let you kind of dodge around them.
God is crossing the road.
They passed one of the holiest sites on earth for Hindus, the temple of Pashupatinath. Hindus believe Shiva, god of destruction, lives here. They bring their dead to this temple and cremate the bodies on altars beside the river. They believe the smell makes Shiva happy and that he will release the soul from the cycle of reincarnation forever.
You could smell the smells of people being cremated, and then they were dumping them, the remains of that, into the river right beside the cremation center.
Hindus consider the river holy, and those who bathe in it or drink from it will be cleansed of their sins.
We were incredibly excited the morning that we were scheduled to fly to Lukla, get into the mountains, and begin our trek.
It's October, normally the driest month of the year. But this year, the summer monsoons have lasted weeks longer than normal and backed up the flights to Lukla. The team was bumped from their scheduled flight of 6:15 to a later flight.
We didn't realize at that time that Lukla was rated as the most dangerous airport in the world.
Well, Plan B. This is what you call rolling with the punches. All flights canceled today. Not just Yeti, all the flights. Too many clouds in the mountains. So we'll go back to the Yak and Yeti and try again tomorrow. Bummer.
What's the reason the clouds cause us not to be able to land?
Because they can't see the runway. You know, obviously things are pretty clear here, good visibility. But when you get up 9,000 feet, 45 minutes from here, you've got to be able to see that runway at Lukla. It's just, it'd be way too dangerous to try to do that on instruments. Yeah.
When we got back to the hotel, some of us were in the lobby, and we noticed that there was some chatter in the air, and we noticed that there were people in the lobby, some of the foreigners, that were talking on their cell phones, and they looked a little fearful. We didn't really know the ramifications of what it was, but there seemed to be something going on. We went over and we talked to a couple of the people that were there, and they said, have you heard? And they told us then about the plane crash.
It was the flight they were supposed to be on. Early that morning, Yeti Flight 103 took off from Kathmandu. At first, skies were clear, but as the plane descended down to Lukla, high winds blew clouds in and covered the runway. It was impossible to see, but too late to pull up. The pilot missed the runway, hit a fence, and crashed. He survived, but the rest of the passengers, 16 trekkers, the co-pilot, and a stewardess, died. Wayne heard the news in the lobby and told Mark and Ann. Mike and Doug saw a news report on CNN. They tried to find Ed, but he was across town inspecting new hotel arrangements due to the change in schedule. When Ed returned to the hotel, he hadn't yet heard the news.
We got some news for you.
We just heard recently in the lobby from some German tourists that
The second flight, the second Yeti flight going into Lugla did not make it. Crashed into a cliff, killed all but one passenger.
Oh my.
We got confirmation by going on CNN on their website, and it is confirmed, and the story is posted.
Where's Mark? We need to call home real quick.
We've already done that. We've already done it. It was the Germans. Or Germans.
Germans, 2 Nepalese, and 2 unidentified nationalities.
Well, we just need to huddle this evening as a team, kind of assess where we are, talk through this. My first thought was, those were lives who had families somewhere in this world, and there were going to be grieving families.
The group of people that had come in the day before when we arrived at the Yak and Yeti that were standing next to us was a group of German trekkers. The sense of joy in their faces and their eyes that they finally arrived, and the adventure that was about to come.
And that was them on the plane.
And that was them. And they died.
At the time, my wife was pregnant with our second child, so I just think to my wife, my little girl, Maggie, and then the baby that was to come.
It took us a day to get over the shock that could have been us.
While we did not know any of these individuals on this flight, I still feel like part of family has passed here simply because they were here in the area, headed to the same region we were. We would have been on the trail together today. And so while these folks apparently are from Germany, according to CNN, I would just encourage each of us to be praying for these families, even though we don't know them, even though they live an ocean away from us in the U.S. Pray for their families. Because we were able to have our lives spared, we just need to remember that we are responsible to live every day and to allow God to use us in a way that will benefit Him in His kingdom work, because life is not a dress rehearsal.
The team separated. Mark, Ann, and Wayne took a cab to Durbar Square, where ancient palaces and temples line the streets. Hundreds of years ago, Nepal's king lived here, but today it is a place of worship for Hindus.
We went there and had the opportunity to learn about the Hindu religion.
How many different gods? 300 million different gods and 300 million different gods and goddesses.
300 million.
It's more than population.
Gods and goddesses.
Yes, sir, God and goddesses.
Worshippers wait to be personally blessed by the Kumari, one of 10 living goddesses of Nepal. This girl will live in the temple and reign as a living goddess until she reaches puberty, at which point she will lose her goddess status. Until 2006, Nepal was considered a Hindu kingdom, the only official Hindu nation in the world. Although it is now considered a secular nation, Hindu traditions are still the way of life for the majority of citizens.
They would take goats and other animals, and they would perform sacrifices to the gods right there in the middle of the street.
I could not believe, it was very, very eye-opening. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Hindus believe that Kali, goddess of destruction, inhabits this idol. She is an evil goddess and greatly feared. In the 17th century, court was held here before Kali. The belief is that anyone who tells a lie before her will instantly bleed to death. Worshippers pay to light candles of incense to Kali and feed her. At each altar, worshippers receive a tika, a red dot worn on the forehead. This man wipes red paste off the elephant head god onto his forehead. The Taleju temple is open only one day a year, on this day. Only Hindus may enter. Inside, they sacrifice buffaloes and receive blessings. The team became interested in the work Bishwa was doing for the people of Nepal. They came together and listened as Bishwa told stories of challenges he has faced as a Christian and how his ministry serves the poor. His faith has not been in Nepal very long. Christians had to worship in secret underground churches until 1990. That afternoon, Bishwa shared his dream of serving the thousands of poor people of Nepal, and in the process, telling them about the God he serves. The time had come to make the final decision. Should they risk flying to Lukla?
You got to realize that I was considered the formal team leader for this trip. I did not want to impose, strongly direct what I thought the team should do, but I wanted it to be a team decision. There were some that were questioning, is this something I really want to do? This sounds more dangerous than what I signed up for.
I had doubts myself whether I even wanted to attempt it, knowing that I had a wife, a little baby, little girl who was 4, and at that time, one in my wife's tummy who was about to be born.
I didn't want anyone on this team to feel like that they were pressured into doing something that they didn't feel comfortable with. But I also want to respect the feelings of those. Ann, I know you're one, there may be others.
I'm ready to go for it. If we can get there, I feel like my heart will be okay by a woman's intuition. I'm willing to do it.
Thinking about my family, emailing them, later calling them, my wife was okay. She wasn't freaking out. She wasn't worried. It made me kind of think, well, how come she ought to be worried more? But she was, so in a funny way, that gave me, hey, I don't need to. Maybe she was doing that for me, so I wouldn't worry.
Did call home after that, and my wife is a very strong, as strong or stronger than I am, and she said, well, you didn't go halfway around the world to turn around and come back. You better get to base camp. And for me, that was knowing that she was going to be okay, and I guess that she was 110% behind me. Whether that's how she actually felt, I don't know, but it was enough that I was ready to go the next day.
In the end, after we talked through it, we recognized there was risk, but it was a risk that we felt was reasonable to take. Everyone ended up agreeing to get on the plane as soon as possible and fly to Lukla.
Seeing the Himalayan mountains for the first time was just unbelievable.
The first couple that you see is just,
They're breathtaking.
you're speechless. It's totally beautiful.
We finally get close enough we can see the runway, and it's like, hey, there it is, it's short.
The plane had to nosedive down as we were approaching the runway because the runway was tilted.
Landing at that airport in Lukla was a relief.
We land and everything, and we're safe, and everybody's relieved, and everybody claps, which probably happens on every single flight. You know, people are clapping that they're okay.
Their guide through the mountains would be Dundee Sherpa, a friendly man with endless endurance. The locals here are naturally acclimatized to the high altitudes of the Himalayas. Their blood contains more oxygen than people at sea level, making it easier for them to breathe at high altitudes. They also possess an amazing amount of strength for their modest size.
They were like He-Man, or Superman.
They may only weigh 110 pounds themselves, but they have developed the ability to put a big load on their back and get it to its destination.
Okay, I will go first. Follow me.
The spirits of the team were high, for they were finally crossing the threshold into the vast Khumbu region. Rushing beneath them was the highest river on earth, the Dud Kosi. The water from this river originates from the Khumbu Glacier, the same glacier on which Everest Base Camp sits.
The air was like air you've never smelled in your entire life. It's the freshest air I've ever smelled.
It was just gorgeous. And there was a part of me that still wanted to hike a lot in that area because it was so beautiful.
It is just beyond words. Only when you're able to go and you trek on those trails and ponder the beauty does it really sink in, for me at least, the majesty of God. How awesome this creation is. And in Genesis, when it says, in the beginning God created, our God is a creative God. And I think when God finished it all, when he stepped back and said, this is good, I think in today's vernacular, he probably stepped back and said, wow, look at that. That is really awesome. That's the Himalayas to me.
There's clouds up in the air, and then all of a sudden you kind of see this little part of the clouds. It parts, and behind the clouds you can see a peak. So you don't realize that there's this huge mountain behind those clouds until the clouds open up. And then you see just the peak of that mountain. And it is so tall, it's almost unbelievable. It's almost like that's not real.
First day of trekking was a long day. We had so much excitement and anxiety built before the trip just for the plane flight that just landing there, we were probably close to being tired. And that being the first day of having weight on your back, it was a pretty tough day.
Anne was having trouble breathing. She discussed her situation with Ed. They decided to push on to Monju and see if she improves.
That'd be both of us.
You expecting a big car today, tomorrow?
The next morning, the team split up. Hem, the lead porter, would lead Ed, Doug, Mike, and Wayne ahead up the trail. Dundee would take Mark and Ann up at a slower pace. They planned to reconvene in Namche Bazaar. Ann wasn't confident she could climb to Namche on foot, so she decided to use another means of transportation.
I love horses. I used to have 5 horses. Okay, let's discuss the day. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go all the way up there and really high. And we're gonna do just great, aren't we? Yes, we are. Yes, and then we're gonna go shopping when we get up there. I had a pancake. Oh, you got a bell? Okay.
Oh my, Miss Ann, you look wonderful on that horse.
Ready?
For generations, the village of Namche has been a trading post for Nepali and Tibetan merchants. The village rests high atop the Namche Hill, 2,000 feet above the river. For those hiking the hill on foot, it is comparable to climbing the staircase of the Empire State Building, wearing a backpack and breathing 30% less oxygen. Twice.
We were baptized by fire with the Namche Hill. Our calves and our hamstrings were just burning because it was just so demanding, and it just felt like that it was going on and on and on forever.
But for those who make it, an exceptional reward awaits. Mount Everest, roughly 27 miles away. If all goes well, the team will be there in 7 days. Everyone made it to Namche successfully, but there is a problem. The plane crash put them 2 days behind. If they follow the original plan, they won't make it to base camp.
Acclimatization at that altitude is extremely important. Altitude sickness, when pushed to the extreme, can be fatal.
They face a serious problem. If they continue trekking without acclimatizing, the risk of altitude sickness increases dramatically. If they stay in Namche as planned, they will not reach base camp. The original plan was to hike to Tengboche. Dundee suggests hiking further to Deboche because it is 300 feet lower in altitude. The plan is risky, but their only chance of reaching base camp. After discussing it, the team decided to skip the acclimatization day and push on. But altitude sickness was not the only obstacle the team faced. The trail was getting more dangerous, and the safety of a team member was in jeopardy.
Ed came in our room and sat down with us, looked at me and said, "Ann, I don't know if you can do this. Do you think that you can do this tomorrow? It's going to be very difficult."
I had some second thoughts about whether or not I should stay.
I had told the team prior to leaving the U.S. that no one would ever be left alone in a village along the trail. They would always have somebody with them. I had also been to base camp 3 years prior. And this team member also had a family member on the team. And I knew if I didn't stay back with this person, their family member would, and they'd sacrifice missing base camp. I'd been there before, and I felt like it was my place to remain behind, take care of this one team member, and let the others go on and enjoy reaching their goal.
Ed and Ann are not the only ones staying behind.
Got a good day ahead of you. Got good weather. As you know, Ann's going to stay here. I'm going to be here. Wayne's going to be here today in Nopsey. And we're going to try to see if we can recharge Wayne's batteries and send him on down the trail tomorrow. So hopefully he'll catch up with you in fair shape. If not, he's going to have a good time here with us, seeing some sights. And we're going to hike a few trails as well. So I'm excited for you. I've been down this trail before. You've just got some majestic beauty in front of you, and it's just going to be, I hope, the most exciting time of your life. Let's just huddle up and have a prayer, and we'll let you guys get on your way. Father God, we just give you thanks for, first of all, your beauty. Beauty that is just beyond us. Okay, guys, go get it. Go get him. I want to see.
How are you going to catch up with this?
While you guys are taking a day off to rest in Tingboche, is that right?
Fairshade. We have a rest day.
That's it. I won't have a rest day.
We have a rest day.
I'll catch up with you guys.
Awesome.
I'll be there.
All right.
I'll be there with yak bells on.
Awesome. Get rested up.
Yes, sir.
Coming here, full force. Head up. Head up.
The team reached camp before dark and rested. Sherpa tea houses are very limited in heat and electricity, but offer protection from the wind.
For rooms, they were cold, not much light. You could hear somebody scratch themselves in the room next door. One place called the Paradise Hotel was the opposite of Paradise.
This is where we slept last night. This is the Hotel Paradise. This is the hot shower right there. Now once you step here, we got ourselves a big giant threshold. Go over. And this is our dining room. Fire that thing up, and then this silver pot on the top's where they boil water, and that's how you get hot water for the shower and hot water for coffee and tea and such. They fed those stoves or those fire environments with yak dung, because once you got past the green line and there was no more firewood, they would actually gather up the yak dung, paste it up onto the wall to dry in the sun, and that's what they used as firewood. Room number 3. This is where I slept last night. cardboard walls, a couple of mattresses. Notice we got a light switch here. You turn it on, and if you trace the wire going up here, it's just nailed. And it's got a little bit of tape right here. It turns into one of these little 3-watt fluorescent deals. We come down the hall through these other rooms. This right here is the toilet. When we open this door, go ahead and just take yourself in there. That's the place where you do your thing, right there. That's pretty much all you got. Just a kind of a hole in the floor.
The highest Buddhist monastery on earth lies on the way to Ferrochet. The monastery is legendary. During the early 20th century, its monks discovered what they believed to be the skeletal hand of a Yeti, the mythical giant of the Himalayas. In 1959, Texas oil millionaire and explorer Tom Slick led an expedition to this region in search of evidence of the existence of the Yeti. Slick visited the monastery in hopes of examining the hand. The monks denied him access. Frustrated, Slick had his men break in and steal the hand. They smuggled it out of Nepal and into India. Slick's friend, Hollywood actor Jimmy Stewart, was in India with his wife. Slick convinced Stewart to smuggle the stolen hand to London, where scientific analysis was performed. Research concluded the hand was of an unknown species. The original hand remains missing. Above the timberline lies Ferrochet. The air is thinner here and colder. The weather in the Himalayas can change suddenly. It can go from clear skies to complete fog in minutes. It is the rest and acclimatize day. Mike, Doug, and Mark scale a mountain opposite Ferrochet and reach 16,000 feet. They will stay there a few hours and allow their bodies to experience the high elevation and low oxygen levels. The day before in Namche, Wayne's health had improved enough that he wanted to try and climb. He set out with a porter who spoke no English. Energized and determined, 2 days later, he caught up with his team.
It was a great reunion to see them. It was good to see our colleague and our fellow trekker back with us, and I know it raised the spirits.
Just to know that Wayne made it to join us was just a great feeling. Almost completed the team.
It, was like the Lord of the Rings, Gandalf or something, kind of showing up out of nowhere, because it really was kind of a Lord of the Rings feeling as we were all trekking through the Himalayas. 7 of us in a row, tracking for hours and hours at a time.
They made it to Le Boucher and rested at 16,000 feet. The next day, they would attempt the trek to Everest Base Camp. It would prove to be the most difficult day of all. But on this night, the team saw one of the most spectacular sights of their lives.
We were there during a full moon, and we would go out and it would be pitch dark, but the mountains were just glowing because the moon's light was reflecting off the snow and the ice. And it seemed like that those mountains were plugged in at night. It was almost like a gift God was giving us.
That was probably the prettiest and most amazing view of being there, I thought, was at nighttime.
Sometimes the sun would be going down and it would be shining on a peak.
Nighttime in the Himalayas was incredible.
Meanwhile, 25 miles away in Namche, Ed had an idea. After spending time with the villagers and seeing their needs, Ed was moved. He wanted to get back to Kathmandu and participate in the work Bishwa was doing for the poor. If he and Anne could get to Lukla, they could take a plane back to Kathmandu. He shared the idea with Anne. At the beginning of the journey, trekking from Lukla to Namche had taken 2 days. Ed proposed trekking the same distance in 1. Anne agreed to give it her best, and they set out the next morning.
It was a very, very long and difficult trek, and I made it. In essence, I felt like I did accomplish something, and I didn't totally fail.
When we got back to Kathmandu, I asked Bishwa, I said, I've heard you talk about your ministry and some of the things that you're doing in the villages. I said, would you have time to help me learn more about that? So Bishwa, for 3 straight days, morning until night, drove me from village to village to village, showing me some of the work that they were doing in these various places. Some of the villages where Bishwa had installed things as simple as toilets, outdoor toilets. And Bishwa said, for only $35, we're able to install this kind of toilet. It's got a roof, brick sides, it's pretty nice. In another village, Bishwa had purchased sewing machines to teach and to train women on how to sew, to give them a livelihood, to help support their families. Another village, they had put in place a health clinic. Bishwa calls this his platform, and in each of these villages, he looks for a way to go in and meet a need and help people find a way to just simply bless them. Probably the experience that had the most indelible impression upon me was when Bishwa took me to a school in a village where we had to walk about 3 miles from the main road to get to the village.
The village was Dukachup, a segregated community on the outskirts of Kathmandu. Like many villages in Nepal, Dukachup is classified as lower caste. Nepalis in the middle and upper castes do not associate with these people. They are considered untouchables. So naturally, when a friendly visitor comes to Dukachup, it is a big day.
And we sat down in the school with the principal, and one of their biggest needs was to have their first computer in this school. Now, they had very limited electricity there, but it was enough to run a computer and begin to teach children about how a computer works. As we were walking away from the school, the principal, his last words to me were, "Please send computer." And I turned and I looked at him and I said, "I will send you a computer." And as we walked down the trail, Bishwa said, "I can get a pretty good refurbished computer here in Kathmandu for $250. So one of the things that my wife and I gladly did for Christmas, when our children said, "What is it that you want for Christmas this year?" We usually have our long list of things that we desire. I told one of my kids, "I want a toilet." Told another child, "I want a sewing machine." And then my wife and I took the money that we would have spent on each other and we bought a computer. And I couldn't get to Western Union fast enough to send that money to Bishwa so he could get that computer for that school.
At sunrise of the 14th day of the journey, the team set out on their longest, most difficult day of the expedition. If all goes well, by afternoon, they will reach Everest Base Camp.
It was very difficult to breathe. It was cold. It was windy.
I could tell that the altitude was definitely increasing. I could tell the oxygen levels were decreasing.
I had developed a cough and I had some headaches, which is one of the signs that you're getting too high, too fast. It made you realize we're being pushed to the limit physically.
I got to the point where I was getting fairly tired, was wanting to stop, and I could hear my little girl saying, "Go Daddy," and that's all it took, and I'd take off again.
From this view, 2 miles in the sky, stands the peak of Mount Everest. To get to base camp, the team must descend onto the Khumbu Glacier.
We all were breathing more than normal to get the oxygen that your body needs.
You think, well, I'm walking uphill and I know it's steep, but I feel like breathing-wise, I'm running a sprint back home.
Coming in base camp. Base camp, boys. Finally here. Come on, a high five. Yeah.
This is the Kumba Ice Fall, the way they hike up when they summit Everest, and those clouds, that's probably snow being blown off the summit of Everest. And once they get past that, it doesn't get any easier.
There was no big neon sign says you were here. There was no t-shirt shops that for us to get gifts or snow globes or anything like that. But we had made it.
A dream that started out several years ago had been fulfilled.
Doug took out a picture of his wife and daughter. Their photograph had been by his side for the entire journey.
It was a mountaintop experience, definitely. You realize that you've got a bond for years. You've been through something together that's unique, and you've also helped each other make it.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
After 3 days of hiking, they reached Sang-Boucher, 25 miles south of Everest. The team had accomplished their goal and headed for home. They had come to Nepal to trek to Everest Base Camp and gaze upon the highest mountain on Earth. What they discovered was a new respect for life on this planet and an awakening to their greater purpose.
I think I realized there how much we as humans have as far as that little extra in the tank that a lot of us don't think that we really have. I think that kind of helps me when I got back to the States. Perseverance pays off, and that, you know, keep going. Even though that you think that you're at the end of the line, you can keep going.
I remember coming back just feeling like there's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of things in the world to experience.
I was so touched, I think more by the culture, the great need that these people have. You can't even put it into words. So I came back definitely a different person.
You know, you learn to start to care about those people. When you're in our environment all day, every day, you tend to kind of forget the way it is. You go there and you're in the midst of it and you're there for days, you start to remember we're different than the majority of the world. The majority of the world's this way.
Being in the mountains, I've always felt like I was closer or at a peace with God when I was in the mountains. And it was no different being in the Himalayas, seeing the magnificent, just monstrous mountains that these were, and knowing that God had created this. And it just increased and deepened my faith.
So it's caused me to come back and reflect on what I do have and to be grateful, to find ways that I can serve the world a little better, and to remember again, the more you have, the more responsible we are.